What is going on, guys? Today I'm decided that I'm gonna rank all the studio albums produced by Judas Priest, and yeah, so of course they're my second favorite band of all time, and yeah, I've just finished listening to all 18 of them. I spent the whole summer doing that, and today I thought now's the time to rank them all. Judas Priest, they're a band that deserve no introduction. I mean, they're one of the pioneers of heavy metal. They've shaped the genre over the decades, and without them, I doubt heavy metal would be the same as it is now. So, without further ado, I'm gonna get started with it. So, coming in at number 18, it's their 2001 album Demolition, the second album with replacement singer Tim Ripper Owens. Now, yeah, just to get things out of the way, um, I don't hate this album because of actually I don't hate this album at all. Uh, well, the reason why this album is down here is not because of singer Ripper Owens. It's not like the Blaze Bailey albums from Iron Maiden, where I wasn't a big fan of his singing, his voice, and therefore I did not really like those two Blaze Bailey albums. Ripper Owens is not like that. He's a phenomenal singer. He's incredible. Um, I think they made a great choice, Judas Priest, hiring him as a replacement singer, and I think he did a really good job filling in Rob Halford's shoes, you know? Although, he's not the best, because, I mean, come on, it's Halford. Yeah, it's a tough role to fill, but still, really good job. And so I think my biggest problem with this album is how different it is to the rest. It has a lot of new metal elements, and there's some parts of the album that sound like Linkin Park or Korn, and even one of their songs has rap in it, and that is really something that Judas Priest doesn't do at all. And yeah, not really a big fan of that. Also, this is their only album that has cursing in it, and in my opinion, I don't think cursing makes a song cooler or better. So they could have gone without that as well. And so yeah, a very weird album, a very different album. Therefore, it belongs at spot 18. All right, coming in at number 17, we got Ram It Down. Now, I appreciate that they decided to go with a more heavier approach with this album, since the previous album, Turbo, got a lot of criticism from fans for it not being very heavy and being too different from their previous albums. And so with this album, they decided to make it heavier, and I appreciate that. And also, this was originally supposed to be a double album with Turbo. I'm glad that didn't happen. But my biggest problem with this album is that drum machine. I hate that drum machine so much. Me being a drummer, it's like a betrayal. I mean, most of their songs are unlistenable, in my opinion, because of that drum machine. Like, these guys are metal gods, and they're using a 80s pop drum machine. I mean, didn't really sit with me that well. I mean, for most fans, this album is well liked, but most fans aren't drummers, so yeah, that's why it sits at 17 for me. Although there is one song on this album that I absolutely love, and that's the title track, Ram It Down. That song is amazing. It's in my top 20 for best Priest songs. And the drum machine isn't that noticeable in that song, just a really good song in general. So yeah, that's number 17, Ram It Down. Coming in at number 16, we got their original debut album from 1974, Rockarola. Now, this album is a very cute album. It's nice to see how the metal gods started out in the 70s as a blues rock band. They were still discovering their sound. I mean, it's a good album, right? But, you know, they were in their infancy. Yeah, And yeah, so it sits at number 16 for me. Right, so coming in at number 15, we got their 2005 album, Angel of Retribution. We're all happy that Halford has returned, old fans rejoice, but it's still not amazing, you know. I'm glad it's a returned form. I'm glad they took a step away from the new metal and they went back to classic Priest. But there's some of their songs could be a little better. I mean, Hell Rider is an incredible song. I love that. Let's see, Loch Ness, 13 minutes. Could do without it, but yeah, some decent stuff here, some forgettable stuff here, but otherwise a nice comeback. Is it like Brave New World from Iron Maiden? Absolutely not, but a good playing it safe return to form album. Nice. So, coming in at number 14, we have Jugulator from 1997, their first album with Ripper Owens, and this came out after a 7-year long gap between Painkiller and Jugulator, and there's a 7-year long gap without Priest releasing anything. And I really like this album actually. It's heavy. It is really heavy. I think it's their heaviest album to date. And I really like Ripper's vocals. Sure, it's very thrashy, and some songs don't sit too well for me, but there are some songs on this album that are downright incredible. The title track, Bullet Train, oh man, Cathedral Spires. Now that is a good song. So yeah, love the cover as well, really cool. So yeah, while a lot of fans tend to dislike this album, I kind of like it a lot. The reason why it sits at number 14 is because, it's competing against 13 other really good Priest albums. So, yeah. Now, my next up, coming in at number 13, we got Point of Entry from 1981. Now, this one is a strange one, because this released immediately after the colossal behemoth British Steel in 1980. And when British Steel came out, that was a revolution in the metal community. And so I think back then, Priest fans were hoping for something else also very heavy. But then they came out with this very happy, road trip-like classic rock album. And I'm sure that angered a lot of people. But it's a very good album if you take it for what it is. And yeah, when I listened to this for the first time, I was also hoping for something big to follow up British Steel, and it caught me off guard. I didn't like it at first, but it grows on you. It really does. Now, coming in our 12th position, we've got Sin After Sin from 1977. Now, this is also a strange one, because it came in between two giants, just like Point of Entry. It came out in between Sad Wings and Stained Class. So it was a bit of a forgettable one. I wouldn't really say that, but people tend to gloss over it. And there are some really good tracks in this. Starbreaker, Call for the Priest, Diamonds and Rust, Dissident Aggressor. Wow, that is a heavy one. And I think where this album suffers is it has a lot of really good tracks, but quite a few forgettable tracks that I don't really need to hear again. But other than that, also just a really fun 70s album. You could see here that their sound was getting better and better over the years. Their sound was evolving. They were getting heavier and heavier. You can tell that they were preparing for something big with their next album. Nice. Alright, coming in at number 11, we've got their 2014 album, Redeemer of Souls. So this comes out 6 years after Nostradamus, And after the release of Nostradamus, bands were also quite angry at that, so they needed another return to form. And within those 6 years, guitarist K.K. Downing leaves the band. I think he retires, and they bring in a new guitarist, Richie Faulkner, who is a lot younger compared to the rest of the Priest members, and he does a really good job in the first album with him in it. And his guitar playing style, it had to grow on me a bit, but still, really good album, very heavy. Although it's not quite the exact return to, it's not quite, Painkiller as I was hoping for, but still another just really good return to form album. I think my biggest problem with this album is the sound. It has really bad production. It sounds like it's being played underwater. It has a strange sound to it that I wish if they release a remaster of the album, that will get fixed. But other than that, just a really fun album as well. Really good. Coming in at our 10th spot, we've got Turbo from 1986. Yes, I like this album. A lot of fans, they really like to dislike on this album, and I can see why. It's very different. It has like a glam metal approach to it, and it must have put a lot of people off guard back in the 80s. Yeah, I really like this album because it has a lot of really good songs in it. Turbo Lover starts off strong, and then Reckless at the end. That is also one of my favorite Priest songs. You also got some really good ones like Out in the Cold, Hot for Love, Locked In, Parental Guidance. It's a really good album. I have a lot of fun with this. And yeah, while it's not as heavy as Defenders or Painkiller, still just really nice to just sit back, relax, listen to it. It's a good road trip album as well. A lot of good tunes on this, and very underrated. I really like this. Right, coming in at our 9th spot, we've got their latest release, Firepower. Now this is the next best thing since Painkiller. This has a really heavy sound to it. Starts off strong with Firepower, Lightning Strike. A lot of good tunes on here as well. Like I said, it's what fans were waiting for. It sounds a lot like Painkiller in that sense. But there is a problem with this album, and it's just that there's too many songs on it. Yeah, too many songs. 14 songs to listen to. And quite a bit of those songs are filler. So for example, Children of the Sun, let's see, Flamethrower, Lone Wolf. I think those are a few filler tracks worth mentioning. They're not bad songs, but filler is filler. But there are really good stuff. There's really good stuff on here. Lightning Strike, Firepower, No Surrender. Wow, that's a really good one. Yeah, a really good album. And it shows that after 50 years of them playing, they've still got it. And they are making a comeback. They are on a roll. It's amazing. So yeah, really good on them. So coming in at number 9, we got Firepower. Right, now coming in at number 8, a lot of you might be wondering, why isn't this number 1? This deserves to be number 1. This is their best one. But I have some reasons behind why it sits at number 8, and that is British Steel from 1980. Now, my biggest problem with this album is that it has filler, just like Firepower. But a lot of the filler is good, except for this one song, and that's United. That is my least favorite Judas Priest song ever. That is my least favorite one. I hate that song. And I hate how it's at the very middle of the album as well. And yeah, so if I listen to this album and skip United, it's amazing. But United being on here, it's the reason why I put it at number 8. But this is amazing, to say the least. I mean, it kicks off with Rapid Fire, and then Metal Gods, and then the classic Breaking the Law. And I also love the song Living After Midnight. I know it's like a trend to hate on it now because of how popular it is, but I still really enjoy that song. And then it just ends with Steeler. I think that is one of the best album endings I've ever heard. This album has one of the best openers, Rapid Fire, and one of the best endings, Steeler. Yeah, really good, great song. Plus the guitars on this, the riff, it really cuts your ears like a razor blade. Hence the razor blade on the cover image. It really is a metaphor. So yeah, coming in at number 8, we've got British Steel, a true classic, an album that really shaped this whole heavy metal genre. I mean, it's one of the most influential of all time. So yeah, sitting in at number 8. Number 7 is going to be a very controversial one. A lot of you are going to probably get mad at me for putting it this high. A lot of you might be saying, what? This deserves to be at the bottom. I hate this. And that is Nostradamus from 2008. I love that album so much. Yeah, it's long. Yeah, there's a lot of preludes and stuff. There's a lot of filler. But wow, I just love the fact that they took a risk and went with the symphonic power metal masterpiece. You know, I am a huge fan of power metal. My favorite band of all time is Stratovarius. They are power metal. You know, Nightwish, Sonata Arctica, Blind Guardian, Halloween. I love it. I love it all. I'm a huge power metal fan. I can listen to power metal all day. And I love that they decided to make Nostradamus a symphonic / power metal album. It just really makes me happy. And yeah, it's not really an album to just rock out. It's an album where you have to sit down, listen to it, take in the music, just like most power metal albums. So yeah, I can understand why Priest fans really dislike this, because it has a very different change in sound to the rest of Priest. But that's another thing. I don't really want to listen to the same album every time. Every time they release something, I don't want it sounding the same. So I just love music diversity, especially in metal. So yeah, sitting in at number 7, Nostradamus, a true masterpiece, to say the least, in my opinion at least. Nice. Now, coming in at our 6th position is Stained Class from 1978. Now, this is another influential masterpiece that they produced. It came out during a time when the future of heavy metal was looking grim. I mean, Black Sabbath weren't doing too well, and people didn't know what was going to happen next. But then they released Stained Class, and that changed everything. Similar to British Steel, fans were really happy with this album. Same with me. I mean, this is a huge, I say it over and over again, but it's another masterpiece that they released. And all songs here are just really, really good. I love the 70s sound to it. Love the cover art. Just really, really good. Now, while Stained Class might be, like I say, a masterpiece, it's still no match against Sad Wings of Destiny, coming in at number 5. An aging classic, getting better and better with age. Now, this is what you call a heavy metal pioneer album. I mean, Rock'n'Rolla, that was more like blues rock. But Sad Wings, that's when heavy metal began. It came out during a time when no one heard something like it. So they released an album that really changed rock music. And I think everything on here, I could listen to this album from start to finish without skipping anything. There's something about the album that just, it gives me a warm feeling inside me. It's just really fun, really nice. I'm running out of adjectives to describe these albums because of how good they are. So yeah, that sits at number 5. A timeless classic that 100 years, 200 years in the future of metal, people will still be listening to it over and over again. That's how good it is. And I think Rob Halford said in an interview once that this was his favorite album out of all the 18 albums. And honestly, I agree with him. I mean, it's a good choice. Yeah. So, coming in at our 4th positions. Remember, when I rank these are by fractions. Fractions. Because it doesn't mean that if something is at number 4 and something is at number 5, it doesn't mean that there's a big difference, especially this high up in the list. I mean, with further down in the list, yeah, there were huge gaps between the albums, but coming up this high, it's fractions. So it's like the difference between $1 million and $1,000,001. That's how little the difference are between these two albums are. So, yeah, coming in at number 4, we've got Defenders of the Faith. Came out in 1984 as well. Now, this is also another heavy metal behemoth, a heavy metal colossal record. I mean, you start off with Free Will Burning. You know, the energy is already there. It moves on to Jawbreaker, Rock Hard, Rock Free, and then The Sentinel. Oh my goodness, The Sentinel. That is one of my favorite Priest tracks. Oh, I love that song. And then it just goes on and with Love Bites, Eat Me Alive. Yeah, really, really good album. Plus, I love the cover art as well. It's ludicrous. That's what it is. So yeah, they were on fire in the early '80s, but then they got a bit lost towards the end of the decade. But in 1984, things were going well with Defenders of the Faith. Now, coming in at our 3rd spot on this list, Painkiller. Now, this is a really special album because after the embarrassment that was Ram It Down, they needed to think of something. So what did they do? They got rid of that drum machine and they got Scott Travis. Scott Travis, he saved the whole band. You kick off with the drum intro on the Painkiller song. That kicks off the whole album. The energy, the rage, the power in those drums. It really does it for me. I mean, I guess a lot of Priest fans, they just think, you know, drums is drums. But for me, when I hear Scott Travis playing in the Painkiller album, that is what I like to hear the best. Scott Travis's drums. You know, me being a drummer, after all. But yeah, I think this is his album. Scott Travis's album is Painkiller. I love how the drums on that album are recorded like almost as loud as the guitars. So you really hear them. You hear every single beat, every drum, and you hear it clearly. And also his classic double bass drum pedal. No, Painkiller, I love it. Plus all their songs. Of course you got the Painkiller title track. But then you got like Hell Patrol, One Shot at Glory. I think that is also one of my favorite Priest songs. Yeah, a game changer if you ask me. It really is. Now, coming in at number 2, a lot of people are gonna think, huh, I've never seen this album ranked this high before. But yeah, and that is Killing Machine from 1978. Now, when I see a lot of these Priest album rank lists, Killing Machine is usually ranked like towards the middle, like spot 10, spot 9, and I don't see why, because this album is amazing. I mean, it's the first album to introduce that classic heavy metal ear-ripping sound that they got. I mean, Stained Class had, you know, that 70s classic sound to it. But Killing Machine was the first one to really give us those hard riffs. And it's also the album where, you know, they went all over, all obsessed with the leather, you know, hell bent for leather. I think it's the album where Halford started riding his motorcycle on stage, and he started wearing that police hat and leather jackets. It all began with this album. So yeah, with songs like Delivering the Goods, Hellbent for Leather, Take on the World, that is a really, really underrated song. I love that song. Burning Up, the title track, Killing Machine, and then Before the Dawn. That is one of my favorite Priest ballads. So yeah, it having a spot at number 2 is well deserved. I really love this album. It deserves this number 2 spot. For those deductive people out there, I'm sure you all know what is my number 1 album. And it really can't be anything else. And I go on these ranking lists, and it's always at number 1. Well, not always, but most likely it's at number 1. And that is Screaming for Vengeance from 1982. And like I said, it just can't be anything else. I mean, back in the 80s, I'm sure fans were disappointed with the release of Point of Entry. They wanted something heavy, and they wanted Judas Priest to release a true follow-up to British Steel, and wow, they delivered with this. I mean, this album kicks off strong with the Hellion Electric Eye, just a really fun, you know, head bobber, if you know what I mean. And then moves on to Riding on the Wind, another song full of energy, full of enjoyment. And then it takes a, and then Bloodstone as well. I think that is my favorite Judas Priest song ever. No, this album has it all. It's got fast, it's got heavy, and it's got slow. It's got your classic stuff. It's got your popular stuff, like You Got Another Thing Coming. It's got your heavy stuff. No, this is the definitive Judas Priest album. If someone goes up to me and asks me, what Judas Priest album do you recommend? Obviously, it's Screaming for Vengeance. Now, this is, it is number 1. I think it is my second favorite album of all time. Yeah, it is that good. So when this came out, it came out in 1982, and that was at the same time as Number of the Beast from Iron Maiden. So there was a big rivalry. Well, a lot of fans like to compare the two albums, you know, the two heavy metal behemoth albums, and most people pick Screaming for Vengeance, and so do I. I love this album so much. You know, I just, you know, a lot of fans, they do say that the one problem with this album is that they're not really a big fan of You Got Another Thing Coming anymore because it's too famous. But just like Living After Midnight, I also love to listen to that song as well. And no, just I just keep repeating myself. It's just that good. This album, number 1. Yeah, that is my number 1 album. My number 1 Judas Priest album. Out of all the 18 albums they released, Screaming for Vengeance comes in at number 1 for me. Yeah. Now, you may be wondering, how will this ranking list look like if it was placed in a tier list format? So, I've taken the time to rank all these albums also in the form of tier list as well. So, of course, you know, Judas Priest, no album is an F tier. So the lowest we have here is D tier. And here we got Demolition. That is D tier, along with Ram It Down. That will also be placed in D tier. And those will be the only D tier albums. And then next up will be Rock'n'Rolla, that'll go in C tier, and Angel of Retribution as well. That'll be C tiers. And let's see, Jugulator, yeah, we'll also place that in C tier. That makes sense. Next up, we had Point of Entry. Yeah, that will be B tier, significantly better, along with Sin After Sin. Yeah, that's good. And I think I'll put Redeemer of Souls in B tier as well. And Turbo. I think we'll put Turbo there as well. Yeah, sounds good. And in A tier now, we'll have Firepower, a much better album, really good. And British Steel, A tier album, really good. And yes, the underrated Nostradamus, that's also gonna go in A tier. And Stained Class, because obviously it's a classic. And now the top 5 are all gonna go in S tier, because they're that good. So Sad Wings, Defenders of the Faith, Painkiller, Killing Machine, and of course, the legendary Screaming for Vengeance. And there we go. There you have it. That's the Judas Priest tier list of my album ranking. And there you have it. That is my ranking of all the 18 studio albums of Judas Priest. Yeah, wow. That was a very, very hard list to make, because these albums are so, so good. And when you're as good as Judas Priest, you really release a lot of good albums. And it makes it hard for me, because then I have to rank all these amazing albums. It's really hard. But I think my thoughts on these albums, where they stand on this list, I think my preference is set. I think I have no objections, no disagreements. Yeah, I'm quite proud of my list, and of course, Screaming for Vengeance being #1. Yeah, it always was, and it always will be. It's that good of an album. Right. So, thank you for, should I say, spending your precious time watching me, just a metalhead, talk about the Judas Priest albums I love. And yeah, hopefully this was interesting for you. And have a great day. Rock forever.